In this video, I'm going to teach you my writing process and how I manage multiple writing projects simultaneously. This process isn't for the faint of heart, and it certainly isn't for beginners. Managing multiple projects takes organization, experience, and discipline. If you are still relying on a muse or inspiration to write, you are too early in your journey as a writer. Keep practicing getting a project done reliably on time, and come back to us when you're ready. Additionally, I did not start with this process. I've been writing for over 10 years and arrived at this system organically over time through experimentation, mistakes, and learning lessons the hard way. This is my process now, but it will not be my process forever. My process evolves over time, and yours should too. Alright, enough warning labels, let's get into it. Whether in an office or as a writer, managing multiple projects is a skill required by any true professional. In our day jobs, we are often met by many competing tasks, which we have to prioritize, track, and keep moving. We don't have the luxury of obsessing over a single project from start to finish, having to start and stop multiple projects in discrete steps. Your writing should be no different. At any given time, I manage 3 distinct writing projects. The main project, let's call it Project A, is a novel, screenplay, or some other major writing assignment. Project B is my short stories or novellas, and Project C is YouTube. Yeah, I count YouTube as a writing project, both because of writing scripts and because it's how I promote my writing. In addition to this, I have miscellaneous other hobby projects going at any one time. For now, let's group those under Project D. In an ideal world, I'd be writing full-time, able to devote my entire day to these tasks. In reality, my day job makes that pretty difficult. For the purposes of this video, we'll be assuming a full-time writing schedule, though I'll address how it works for part-timers later on. The 3 projects are tiered in order of importance. Project A takes precedent over Project B, Project B over Project C. In practice, this means Project A has to come first. It's what I spend the majority of my day on. I do not allow myself to work on Project B until the day's work on Project A is finished. Similarly, I don't work on Project C until the work on Project B is finished. What work for the day entails is dependent on the project. For a novel or short story, it might be outlining a chapter or writing a certain number of scenes. For YouTube, it might be scripting the next video, filming, or editing. I know what my limits are in terms of the amount of work I can do in a given time period. I set reasonable goals and work towards them. A typical full-time day of writing looks as follows. I wake up around 8:30 and spend a half an hour getting used to consciousness. I take my daily medications, feed the cat, use the bathroom, so forth. My workday starts at 9, and I spend the first hour on administrative tasks. Things like checking my email, seeing how the latest YouTube video is doing, responding to comments, checking the sales data for my self-published titles, and so forth. I do this first thing because it gives time for the caffeine to kick in as my brain wakes up. Work on Project A starts at 10 and generally lasts until 2, with a break for lunch around noon. The work is whatever comes next for the project. If I need to outline a new chapter, I sit down and do that. If I've got writing to do, I put on some music and get to it. This work continues until I've completed all of the work for that project for that day, even if it means going past 2 o'clock. This ensures that no matter how many projects I'm juggling, I'm always making progress on the main one. Then, once work is completed on Project A, I take a short break of around 15 minutes, and then get to work on Project B, doing whatever comes next for that project. Work on Project B continues until the work for the day is done, usually around 4 or 5 o'clock. I take another short break and then it's on to Project C. I work on Project C from about 4 or 5 to 6 in the evening. I do my best to wrap up once it hits 6 o'clock and stop working for the day, even if I didn't make all the progress I wanted to on Project C. As I said at the beginning, this assumes a full-time schedule, Monday through Friday. In addition to that, I write on Saturdays, though they're a bit different. I only work for about 4 or 6 hours on Saturday, and don't allow myself to work on Project A at all, instead devoting that time to Projects B and C. This both gives me a break on Project A and helps make sure Projects B and C don't fall too far behind. For those hobby projects I mentioned earlier, Project D, I only work on those on weeknights and Saturdays. I never work on Sundays on anything, including writing and hobby projects. This is to prevent burnout. When I first started writing, I did the everyday thing. I found I could sustain that for 3 weeks and would then crash on the 4th. That meant I was unproductive roughly 7 days out of the month. Now, by taking Sundays off, I avoid burnout and only lose 4 days a month instead of 7. For those curious, I tend to spend Sundays watching movies and playing video games to distract me from working. So that's the full-timers. What about us folks with day jobs? Well, the system works the same, just shifted. On a typical work week, I can only write during nights and weekends. I'm sure many of you are in the same boat. I use the same tiered system, but replace hours with days. Monday through Wednesday, with some overlap on Thursday, is for Project A. Thursday through Saturday for Project B, with some overlap on Friday and Saturday for Project C. Hobbies get fit in wherever I can squeeze them. Again, I take Sundays off. Alright, so that's the organizational method, but how do I actually write them? How does the writing process support this system? This is where things get complicated, so stay with me. My writing process is handled in 4 repeating stages. Stage 1 is outlining, Stage 2 is writing loose, Stage 3 is writing polished, and Stage 4 is editing. Outlining is absolutely critical to this process. We can all debate architects versus discovery writers, or whatever they're called these days until we're blue in the face. But for this process, you need to outline. For the record, I've done both systems and everything in between, and I arrived at this process not from writing, but necessity. Between a day job and a long commute, I needed to take advantage of whatever time I could find. Outlining helps me to lift the heavy burden of figuring out plotting, pacing, scenes, and all the rest, while worrying about the writing later. I generally only outline novels or screenplays. For short stories and YouTube scripts, I keep a running list of notes that serves the same purpose. But I don't stress about the outlining as much. For the outlining stage, I only outline a chapter at a time. So once I've written chapter 1, I sit down and outline chapter 2. I will only outline chapter 2. Chapters 3, 4, and so on can wait their turn. This allows me the benefits of outlining without getting too rigid with the story. I make these chapter outlines as detailed as possible, including scene breakdowns, relevant beats, important character arc moments, world building details I want to slip in, and anything else I can think of. The outline really can't be too detailed. I don't linger any longer than I need to, but write down more or less anything that comes to mind. Once the outline is done, it's time for Stage 2, writing loose. See, I write each chapter twice in a leapfrogging pattern. The first time I write it loose, and the second time polished. This also arose out of necessity because I work in an office. Some days I am wall to wall with meetings, emails, and assignments, while other days might leave me a half an hour here or there to write. I would do this in a Google Doc through my web browser. The problem is that at work, I didn't have access to all my notes stored on my computer at home, although world building and character stuff we like to obsess over. The goal when writing loose is to simply get the crap on the page. If I've only got 20 minutes to write a scene, I don't want to spend half that time looking up or trying to remember minor world building details or trying to come up with the exact right name for a character. So when I say I write loose, I mean loose. If I can't remember a character's name, I'll simply write left bracket, the word character, right bracket. Same for world building information I can't remember. I don't worry about the prose either. I'll write good prose if it springs to mind, but mostly I'm just trying to get the action on the page. The job is not to make it pretty, it's to get it done. I write like this scene by scene all the way through the chapter. So let's say that was chapter 2. I then move on to outlining chapter 3. Once the outline for chapter 3 is completed, I write chapter 3 in the same loose style. Only then is it time for polish. This is when I go back to chapter 2. I open up the loose draft, usually in Google Docs or Word, and then I open a clean document for the polished version, usually in Scrivener. Writing the polished version involves me first reading through the scene in the loose version. I think about the loose version, where the faults are and what parts need more detail. Then I write the polished version paragraph by paragraph into the clean document. This is the point I worry about prose, making sure the world building details are correct and all the rest. This probably sounds an awful lot like writing a first and second draft, but it's the breakdown of the process that differs. Instead of writing two distinct drafts where I'm worried about everything, I'm writing two discrete chunks with limited objectives. This allows for the polished version to be written much faster and to a higher level of quality. The outline handles all the big brain thinking, the strategy and craft, story structure. The loose writing allows me to get the action down, to focus on the moment without worrying about the details. The polished version allows me to focus on the fine-tuning, on the precision work of engaging prose and getting specific details right. Instead of having to juggle all of the plot and characters and prose and world building in my head all at once, I'm able to focus on only the parts I need to at that given moment in time. Thus, even when I'm writing the chapter twice, each version gets written more quickly into a higher quality. This leapfrogging process continues all the way through the rest of the book. With chapter 2 finished with a polished version, I skip over chapter 3 and work on chapter 4, outlining and writing the loose version. Then I go back to chapter 3 and write it in a polished form. Then it's on to outlining chapter 5 and writing its loose version. So on and so forth until the book is done. Only once the polished version of the book is completed do I consider it a finished draft. Then it's on to every writer's least favorite part, editing. I normally take 2 to 4 weeks off from a project before editing it. It's important to get some distance from the work before trying to fix it, though you shouldn't let that gap linger for too long. As writers, we have this crutch of waiting months or even years to come back to a work so we can read it like new for the first time. This is a bad habit and one you should break as early in your career as possible. Being able to train the editor in your brain to see the faults in a work, regardless of how much time has passed, is absolutely a skill and one you should hone in parallel to your writing. While beta readers and outside feedback is important, you should only pursue those avenues once you have done everything within your ability to analyze and fix your own work. You should be fully capable of pointing out the flaws in your work without someone else having to do it for you. When it's time for me to edit my work, I generally print it out on physical paper and sit down in my reading chair to work on one chapter at a time. During this process, I take extensive, brutal notes. Pull no punches, take no enemies, no soft words, no easy outs, no excuses. You need to be completely honest with yourself about the pros and cons of your work. Notice I said your work. You should be kind when editing other people's work. There's no reason to be a monster about it. To give some examples, when I edit my work, I will often leave notes like, "This section is boring. I have no sympathy for this character. This doesn't make any sense." Or even crossing out the title of an entire chapter and writing "nothing of consequence happens here." It is not a fun process, but a needed one. The higher a standard I can hold my writing to while editing, the easier the rewrite will be. As editors, our job is not to appease the artist in us, it is to diagnose a sick patient. Notice I said diagnose and not remedy. Don't worry about fixing the problems when editing. Only worry about identifying them. Again, this is about breaking up the task into discrete pieces to make those pieces faster and more accurate. Once the full manuscript is reviewed, I take another 2 weeks off and then start the rewrite. The rewrite follows the exact same process as above. The only difference is that this time around, during the outlining stage, is when I try and think of how to fix all those problems I found in the editing stage. Alright, so that's the basics of both my project management and writing processes. Let's cover some loose ends before we wrap this thing up. So for starters, why do I have this complex labyrinthian writing process? Well, it arose over time as I tried to maximize the opportunities for writing I had available. For me, sitting down and writing takes a lot of concentration. I basically need full tunnel vision if I'm going to do it well. That tunnel vision is a luxury I'm rarely afforded in an office. So I need a process that allows me to write in small chunks, even when distracted. In order to do that, I have to take the complex process of writing and break it down into simpler, easier to understand pieces. I can outline when on the subway or during quiet moments at work, giving my full attention to plot, character, and so forth, without worrying about mechanical action or prose. Writing loose allows me to get the action down and figure out how each beat plays out in sequence without getting bogged down in word choice or minor details. With the outlining and action done, writing polished allows me to fully focus on the prose, on making the language sound as good as it can, as all the heavy lifting has already been done. Same goes for editing and revision, handling it in small, discrete chunks. I handle making videos the same way, breaking up scripting, filming, and editing. Because each step is manageable and everything is documented along the way, I have to keep very little information in my head. All of my project notes are in OneNote, the outlining is done in a physical notebook, and the loose and polished versions are kept in separate documents. This keeps the mental load on me at any one time kept to a minimum. All of that in turn allows me to manage multiple projects at once. Because each step is handled in sequence, I always know what the next thing I need to do is when I sit down to write. Because of the separation and documentation, I always have the information I need when I need it. And because the projects are tiered in importance, progress is always being made on the most important ones. My novel won't fall by the wayside because I'm distracted by a short story or making YouTube videos. No offense. By utilizing this process, I'm able to get more done faster and to a higher quality than if I was writing traditionally. But there is one final pitfall to this system we need to cover, but it's one that can be used as a benefit if you're smart about it. What happens when I get stuck? I can't speak for every writer, but I get stuck enough that I needed to come up with a solution. More importantly, I've learned there isn't really a good way for me to brute force my way through those roadblocks and still be happy with the result. Often I just need to let my brain chew on the problem for 3 or 4 days to come up with a solution. But that means 3 or 4 days of zero productivity. This is where working multiple projects comes back into play. Getting stuck on one allows me to work on another. But wait, didn't I say at the start of this video that I don't allow myself to work on the next project until work on the preceding project is done for the day? Well, that's what we in the business call a lie. But it was a lie for a good reason. I want you to be very careful about this, as it is the single greatest pitfall to this system. One of the biggest lures when working multiple projects is to bounce to the other the minute we get stuck or hit a tedious stretch we don't want to deal with. Sticking to a project, even when it's difficult, takes discipline, and it's one of the reasons this system requires it. But if we're careful, we can fix this with our scheduling system. It's true that I work on project A until the work is done, typically around 2 p.m. Only then do I move on to project B, unless I'm stuck. If I'm stuck, and I know I'm stuck, I work on project A until 2 p.m. I spend upwards of 4 hours thinking about and trying to resolve the problem. If 2 hits and I'm still stuck, then I move on to the next project. That way, no matter what, I'm still making progress on 2 of my 3 projects. This is only if I'm stuck. If I'm not stuck, I keep working on project A until it's done, even if that takes me long past 2 p.m. Same for all the other projects. These rules may seem arbitrary, and I encourage you to experiment with them on your own, but the rules make the system. No one is going to make you write or handle your writing in a responsible manner. The rules help give us guardrails and make sure that we act as disciplined professionals. So that's it. That's how I manage multiple writing projects at the same time and use a segmented writing process that results in faster, higher quality work. If you have any questions about this system, please leave them in the comments below and I will do my best to answer them. I hope you got something out of this discussion. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can support the channel by buying my stories on Google Play. I make these videos as advertisements for my writing, so if you want me to keep making videos, buy my books. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Good kitty.
こういう動きがいい。